Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is episode 43 of our series, Muhammad, the Man Who Changed the World. In our last episode, the Prophet ﷺ had mobilized an army en route to Makkah. And this was following the breach of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah by the Quraysh in supporting the Banu Bakr, one of the allies of the Quraysh against the Huza'a, which was an ally of the Muslims. And once the treaty was breached and Hudaybiyah basically fell apart, the Nabi ﷺ dispatches his army, 10,000 men, in complete secrecy. No one, even the Sahaba themselves, were not fully aware where they were going, what was the objective. And by the time the Muslims arrived in Makkah, it was too late for the Quraysh to really have any kind of mount a defense. And the objective here is clear. The Nabi ﷺ wants to take Makkah as peacefully as possible, and by preventing the Quraysh from mobilizing a defense, this will prevent any kind of hostilities. This happened in the 8th year of the Hijrah, in the month of Ramadan, and the Muslims basically arrive the 16th of Ramadan. On the way to Makkah, just as they arrive outside of Makkah, the Prophet's uncle Al-Abbas is leaving Makkah. And to his surprise, he bumps into the Muslim army. So Al-Abbas, remember, was a Muslim, but he remained in Makkah. He had not performed Hijrah. And in reality, he was helping the Nabi Sallallahu by giving him information as to the situation in Makkah. And he had made the decision to make Hijrah. And so he's on his way leaving Makkah. He finally packed up his goods, his family, and he's on his way to Medina, where he bumps into the Muslim army. And the Prophet ﷺ basically says that you are like the last muhajir. After you, no more hijrah. That hijrah comes to an end now. Why? Because Makkah is being conquered. There is no hijrah after the conquest of Makkah. So Al-Abbas, the Prophet ﷺ says to Al-Abbas, look, go back to Makkah and basically assist us in managing to take Makkah peacefully. And Al-Abbas goes to Abu Sufyan, and they obviously had, Abu Sufyan is the guy in charge, and Abu Sufyan is convinced to come and meet the Prophet ﷺ, and he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and on his way, obviously Abu Sufyan is coming into the enemy territory. Abu Sufyan is arch enemy number one. He is the senior most person of the Quraysh. So think about your arch nemesis. Abu Sufyan walks into the Muslim camp, and Sayyidina Umar says, Allahu Akbar, look, mashallah, Allah has gifted us Abu Sufyan on a platter. Let us execute him. And Al-Abbas says, no, I'm coming to bring him to the Prophet ﷺ. And subhanAllah, in this is a little bit of a spat here. And Al-Abbas mentions to Umar that the only reason you want to kill Abu Sufyan is because he's not a relative of yours. But if I came with one of your relatives, you would not have you would be merciful. And Sayyidina Umar got quite offended by that, because he says, do you really think that I have any favoritism towards my family? And he says, I swear that I would rather have Abu Talib, your brother. I would rather have Abu Talib being here embracing Islam than my own father. That my allegiance is not to my family, and it's not to my tribe, but my allegiance is to Allah and His Rasul. And I would do anything that would make the Prophet ﷺ happy. And his resentment for Abu Sufyan is not on tribal lines, it was on principle lines. And you could see the difference perhaps between the Sahaba who had lived now in Makkah, or lived in Medina with the Nabi Sallallahu, and Al-Abbas, who is still learning, and the concept of tribalism was still deeply ingrained in them. So anyway, eventually Al-Abbas is convincing, and Abu Sufyan is brought to the Nabi Sallallahu, and the Prophet Sallallahu, and Abu Sufyan speak, and it becomes quite clear to Abu Sufyan that this army, 10,000 men, is an army that cannot be defeated. It is impossible. Now as you would say, the writing is on the wall. There's nothing Makkah can do, and for Makkah to resist would just prolong the bloodshed. And Abu Sufyan, at this point, he admits that look, he's on the losing side. He might as well join Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, again, in his astute leadership, he knows Abu Sufyan is a man of prominence. It's difficult. It's difficult for any person, to accept that you were wrong, even when it smacks you in the face. So yeah, for the last 20 years, Abu Sufyan has been an opponent to Islam, and for the last, say, 8 years, since Badr, he's been the arch enemy of Islam. And for him to eat humble pie now, it's very, very difficult. And the Prophet ﷺ acknowledges this and says to him that, that if the people of Makkah surrender, then they will be protected. If when we come in, people should stay in their house and nothing will happen to them. And they should stay, or they stay in the haram and nothing will happen to them in the masjid of the haram. And if they stay in Abu Sufyan's house, then they will be protected, giving Abu Sufyan some kind of privilege that he is now recognized by the new dispensation. And this, again, the Prophet ﷺ understands human sensibilities. One of the great successes of the Prophet ﷺ as a leader was he understood human nature very well. And so he's giving Abu Sufyan, as bitter as it is for Abu Sufyan to accept and to humble himself now, he's giving Abu Sufyan kind of prominence. I mean, maybe in our day and age, you have two competing companies. Eventually, you must accept that your company has failed and it's being bought over by the new company. And the new company says, don't worry, you're the CEO, you've been defeated, but we'll give you a high position in the new company. This is a consolation prize. Of course, Abu Sufyan will come to learn that Islam is the blessing. It's not about having a position, it is about having Islam after coming out of Jahiliyyah. So now the Prophet ﷺ waits till the next morning and he lights, during the evening, he now tells the army to light all their fires so that the people of Makkah can see that they are basically surrounded and that resistance is now futile, and that he also did not want to surprise the people. He didn't want also a panic and a confusion. And so by Tuesday, the 17th of Ramadan, the 17th of Ramadan, as we said, appears to be an interesting date. It was the day that the Battle of Badr occurred, and it's the same day that Makkah is conquered. The Prophet ﷺ encourages and reminds his army that Makkah is a sanctuary, that nothing should be of trees should be uprooted, no one should be harmed, there should be no fighting, that everybody has an amnesty, except if you are in self-defense. And there were really only 9 people which had a death sentence on them. So all the issues that happened, Badr and Uhud, all the fighting with the Quraysh, all of that is water under the bridge, except for 9 people. And we'll talk about some of them. They had a death warrant on them because they did some truly heinous crimes which had to be answered for. And so the Nabi Sallam dispatches different generals to enter Makkah from all different areas, Sayyidina Ali, Khalid Walid, Zubayr. And when he heard one of the Ansar leaders, Sa'ad was one of the leaders of the Ansar, he was given a battalion, and as he was marching in, he was saying certain words. And look, he's pumped. It's a battle. So he was overzealous, and he said, "Today we'll teach the Quraysh a lesson. Today the Quraysh will see." And it's this kind of language. And when the Prophet heard this, the Prophet said, "Nope, today is not the day that the Quraysh will be humiliated. Today is not the day that the Kaaba or the Haram would be violated. Instead, this is the day that the Quraysh will be protected. And this is not, so we're not going to go in with this mindset. We're not going to cause and inflict harm on anyone." And again, to show you his wisdom as a leader, Sa'ad is the main guy of the Ansar. This is not just anyone. This is the leader of the Ansar. And so the Prophet ﷺ demotes him. He takes the flag away from Sa'ad. So obviously Sa'ad is now rebuked. The people of Makkah, the Makkans can see that Sa'ad's words were inappropriate and he's being punished. The leadership is taken away from him. And then the flag is given to Sa'ad's son. So Sa'ad also feels, okay, I can't feel too bad about it. My son is made the leader. And so once again, mashallah, able to take a very delicate situation and diffuse it with wisdom. This is, the Nabi Sallam's masterstroke in terms of human interaction. So the Muslims enter Makkah. And, Abu Sufyan by now obviously also went into Makkah, and he would have told the people, guys, there's no point in fighting, don't resist, don't fight. And, his wife Hind, this very famous Hind, very fiery, strong old lady, she screams at him and she says, what a coward you are. She pulls at his beard. She tells the people, why don't you just kill this man, her own husband? He's a coward, he's a traitor, he's a weakling. He has sold these people out. And Abu Sufyan is saying to the people, don't listen to her. She's going to get you killed. I've seen the army. There's nothing to be gained here. We might as well surrender and accept the rule. And there's nothing, we can't oppose this. And he made a mention that, when he saw the army, that truly he says to Al-Abbas, your nephew has been given a lot of power, and there's no way we can resist against his power. And Al-Abbas says to him, this isn't because it's not a family thing. This is from Allah, and Allah has chosen His Prophet to succeed. And this is an honor for the Quraysh, that don't look at it from the perspective of my family. Rather, Allah chose from us for His Nabi to be from amongst us. And so, of course, they will come to learn this. And mashallah, it's mentioned when the Prophet, how did he enter Makkah? He's entering the conquering hero. Remember how he left Makkah. At the pledge of Aqaba, where he wasn't sure, should I come or go? Or even before that, when he came back from Makkah after the harsh treatment of the people of Taif, he came back almost at the rock bottom, at the lowest point in his life. And he now runs away, and he ran away in the Hijrah, a refugee. Him and Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, hiding in caves, ducking and diving, finally reaching Medina with nothing, starting from scratch. All the harm that was done to him, the 13 years, and now he enters the conquering hero, entering as the conqueror. If anybody has been, you've been working on a project for 20 years, and people have been mocking you, abusing you, killing your followers, trying to kill you, finally you get power over them. Let's not even talk about such dramatic things in life. You have a beef or tiff with someone in your company, and finally you become the manager over that person. How will you feel? How would your demeanor be? The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam comes into Makkah, and the Sahaba says that he's on the camel, and his head is lowered to such an extent that his beard is touching the back of the camel. He's coming in showing absolute no pride, no pomp, no, as a victor. He's coming in with complete humility, lowering his head, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing me to do this. And he basically enters Makkah with very little bloodshed. Some people try to fight, but very few people try to do this. And he marches straight into Makkah, and he goes to the Haram. And around, but now, what would you have seen? If you entered Makkah, you would have seen the Kaaba, and you would have seen around it 360 odd idols. All around the Mataf would have been idols, on the Kaaba idols, all around it are idols. And the Prophet ﷺ now enters the courtyard, the Haram courtyard, and he makes tawaf. And as he makes tawaf, every time he passes by an idol, he points to it and it collapses. And subhanAllah is another miracle. And the whole of Makkah is standing watching, and all the Muslims are standing watching and looking at the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam make tawaf. And as he walks by, he points to each idol, and they fall down on their face one by one, they shatter. And then the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to Sayyidina Ali, go and fetch the key of the Kaaba. And the man who was in charge, so what we should also, it's a very interesting story here, that the keys of the Kaaba was kept by a certain family. In the time of Jahiliyyah, each family had a specific function. One of the functions, for example, of the Banu Hashim, the Prophet's family, was that they were in charge of the well of Zamzam. And remember, they found the well of Zamzam. The Prophet's uncle, a grandfather, he found the well of Zamzam. So for them, administering and managing the well of Zamzam was, of course, made sense. And they did it on behalf of everybody. So their job in the community was to distribute the water to the pilgrims. This other family, they were in charge of the key of the Kaaba. And so when Ali radiallahu anh comes to this family, he basically wrestles them. Obviously, they don't want to give the key. They're trying to protect the Kaaba in their minds. And Sayyidina Ali basically wrestles the key and pushes the guy around and takes the key away, and he brings to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Kaaba is opened. And so when the Kaaba is opened, they find idols in there, and they find pictures which they say are from Ibrahim and Nabi Ismail. And they found divining arrows. What are divining arrows? It's like bones or dice that you would do to tell the future, fortune telling. And the Prophet says this is all filth and religious, this is all paganism, and he removes all of it. And when he finds out that Sayyidina Ali took the keys away by force, the Prophet says this was wrong. Return the key to them. And Allah in fact reveals ayat that you should tuaddi al-amana, that you should return the trust to its people. And until today, subhanAllah, until today, the keys of the Kaaba do not, the king of Saudi Arabia has no say over the key of the Kaaba. It belongs to this family until today. And that if anybody wants to enter the Kaaba, they are the ones that open and close the doors of the Kaaba. So this was from the time of the Prophet ﷺ that he kept, that is their honor, and it remains with him in their family. The Prophet ﷺ then called Bilal. And again, subhanAllah, I guess the moment is an amazing moment. The people of Makkah, the last time they saw Bilal, this black African, nobody, slave, nobody cared about him. The last they saw him, he was being abused, tortured, beaten up, dragged through the streets of Makkah. Everybody would have looked at him as the lowest person in society. In fact, there was perhaps nobody lower than Bilal from their perspective. And they watched this man being pushed around, humiliated, spat on, rocks thrown at him. And he now the Nabi conquers Makkah, and he calls Bilal. Bilal, give the adhan. it's salah time, give the adhan. And Bilal, where does he go? He climbs on top of the roof of the Kaaba. He stands on the roof of the Kaaba, and all of Makkah can see him. And he calls Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. He calls the adhan to pray. One of the Qurayshi men said, Allah was merciful in that Allah allowed my father to die and did not see this sight. This black man climbing on the Kaaba and calling us to his salah. The Nabi comes to them and said, I heard that, or Allah informed me. And then that group of people were reprimanded, and they eventually embraced Islam. And so you can still see amongst the people of Makkah, their tribalism, their racism is still deeply ingrained in them. It's going to take a while to change them. But for them, this was a shock to their system. Of course, from an Islamic perspective, we say how beautiful is it that a man that had no izzah and honor in his society at all, Allah saw his goodness. Allah saw the beauty in Bilal, things that we would not have seen. And Allah elevated him to be the man that will climb on the Kaaba and give the adhan. And just interestingly, as we know, he's the official muadhin of Medina. So he's been giving the adhan for the last 8 years in Masjid al-Nabawi. Every waqt he would be the one giving the adhan. And now he's giving the adhan in Makkah. And subhanAllah, even though after the death of the Prophet, he would stop giving adhan. He completely stopped giving adhan after the Prophet passed away. He couldn't, it was too sad. He was convinced by Sayyidina Umar to give the adhan when they conquered Jerusalem. And so Bilal is the first man, you could say, in history, perhaps the only man in human history to be the muadhin in Makkah, Medina and Jerusalem. What a great honor that Allah had given. And again, just imagine, in Makkah, he was the one, he was the voice of the Muslims. When nobody could talk, Bilal was the only one that had the guts to say, Ahadun, Ahad. They would beat him, hit him, abuse him, and he would keep shouting, one, my Lord is one, my Lord is one. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the honor that he will call to pray in the three holiest places in the world. And also, if I were to ask, I've teach Seerah now for a number of years, if you ask people, list all the names of the wives of the Nabi Sallallahu, who are the mothers of the believers, list all the names of the 10 people promised Jannah, we would struggle, maybe 1 or 2 or 3. But every Muslim in the world knows Bilal, and everybody knows Bilal was the one that was tortured, and everybody knows that he was the muadhin. Allah had honored Bilal in such an amazing way because of his service to Islam. So Bilal gives the adhan, the Muslims make salah, and now the Nabi Sallallahu gives the speech. And he says, La ilaha illallah, لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك والحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير لا إله إلا الله وحده أنجز وعده ونصر عبده وهزم الأحزاب وحده. The takbir that we know in Eid, he says, there is no Lord, none is worthy of worship but Allah, the one and only. He has no associates, he has no equal. He fulfilled his promise. Allah fulfilled his promise. And again, for us, we know and we have the benefit of hindsight. We know that Nabi is eventually going to win. But think of our battles and our struggles today. Whether it is Palestine or Kashmir or wherever it is, the odds are against us. The odds were even greater against the Nabi Sallallahu. He ran alone from Makkah, just even Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. No army, no community, nothing. Just the clothes on his back. We still have so much more. And yet we have this doubt that will Allah help us? Will we get to see the victory? The Nabi Sallallahu had no doubt that eventually, if we do what we need to do, Allah will make a way for us. We don't know how, but Allah will make a way for us. And here Allah gives Makkah without any fighting. And so the Prophet says, Allah fulfilled His promise. Allah promised us victory, and He gave us victory. And Allah promised that He would help His slave, and His slaves, all of us, and Allah did it. And Allah defeated all the enemies all by Himself. Look at this. The Muslims didn't even raise a hand. Allah subdued the enemies for the Muslims. Sometimes Allah can create the situation. Think about it. The Quraysh are the arch enemies of the Muslims. Abu Sufyan is, maybe say, the Netanyahu, the Zionists of today. And Allah made it such that without even fighting, Islam came to them. And in fact, they embrace Islam. That same enemy of yours can become an ally, become a brother in faith. How Allah operates, there's no limits. And so you should never doubt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise so long as we do our promise. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, keep in mind that every claim of privilege, whether that of blood or property, is under my heel except that of the custody of the Kaaba and the supply of the what the Prophet saying, that the pagan system of Jahiliyyah, where people had certain ranks, the tribalism, so the society of the Quraysh before Islam and the tribal system gave privileges to some, rights to some and gave others no rights. And they had certain traditional practices. The Prophet says, this is now abolished, it's finished. And he abolishes the old practices that was contrary to Islam. But he says, except that the sanctity of Kaaba will remain and that giving water to the pilgrims. In other words, what he's saying, the old practices and the old elitism of the Quraysh is over. However, the service and the duty that they were doing, the good things they were doing. So yes, the Quraysh positioned themselves like, we are the special people of Allah. We are the chosen ones of God. Remember, the Quraysh said the same thing, like another group of people. We are the chosen ones of God. We have certain privileges. We are above the law. We can do what we want. The Prophet says, this is over. There is no such thing anymore. And he's a Qurayshi. It's his own people. It's his own family. He's saying, this doesn't exist. However, the good that they were doing of taking care of the Hujjaj and giving Zamzam and protecting the Kaaba, this remains. And then he says, and he informs you that anyone who is slain, even though semi-deliberately with a club or a whip, for him, the blood money will be 100 camels, for them being pregnant. The Prophet is now also saying the sanctity of everyone's life. There is everybody, the life of every person, whether a slave, whether a woman, whether a child, will be protected. And if anyone kills another person unjustly, you'll pay the full penalty. Or, that's if you made a mistake. Of course, if you've murdered the person, then you'll pay with your life. And so the Prophet is saying that he is making firm the human rights and the importance of blood. And that he also abolishes the old blood feuds of the past. This is over. There's no more, this family has beef for that family, we kill you. It's over. It's finished. O people of Quraysh, surely Allah has abolished from you all the pride of pre-Islamic era and all the conceit in your ancestry. SubhanAllah, it's like hard words, but it's again to his own people. It's different when a conqueror comes in, an outsider, and he almost humiliates the people that put themselves on top. But those are his people. And so the Nabi is saying, the arrogance that you had, O Quraysh, and the deceit that you had is finished. It's over. There's no need for this anymore. All men are descended from Adam. We, the Quraysh, have no special genes. We don't believe in in Islam, we don't believe in a chosen people by birthright or by genetics. We believe that Allah honors people based on their closeness to Him, based on their piety, and yes, of course, if you come from a blessed, noble household, you had a grandfather who was a great scholar, you come from the lineage of a Nabi, like the Prophet ﷺ, like the Bani Israel, you come from a lineage of Nubuwah, then yes, that's a praiseworthy thing. But it does not give you any privileges against everybody else. The Nabi says, all of us come from Adam. All of us come from a Nabi. So if you really want to be technical, that all of mankind comes from a Nabi, comes from Nabi Adam. And Adam came from clay. And then he recited, the Prophet recited, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. And the Prophet recited this verse that Allah mentions that, O mankind, all of you come from a single man and a single lady. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. And we created you into diverse tribes and nations. We made you different. It is Allah's design that there is Quraysh and Aus and Khazraj and Capetonian and Malay and Indian. All of this is part of Allah's plan. لِتَعَارَفُوا. Why? So you may get to know, learn and benefit from one another. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. But the only means by which one tribe or one group of people excels over another one is in their connection with Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. Allah is all aware and He knows very well who they are. So now the Prophet ﷺ he establishes the law. He obviously removed the idols. He praises Allah in the oneness. He shows them that Allah's promise will be true. Then the Prophet ﷺ abolishes the old Jahili system of tribalism and a tribal hierarchy, that everybody is equal in this new dispensation, and he makes it very clear that under no circumstances will the blood be shed. And so the shedding of blood, he's not going to be soft on this. And especially now that Makkah has been conquered, that there must be complete peace. He wants to see peace. After this, the Prophet looks at the Quraysh and they're standing before him. He's like a bit elevated. In amongst that group are those who spat on him, who fought against him at Badr and Uhud and Ahzab. There are those who killed his Sahaba. And he looks at them and he says, O people of Quraysh, what do you think I'm going to do with you now? I basically have you at gunpoint. I have my sword at your neck. After you've done everything against me, what will I do to you now? What must I do to you now? And they said, oh, our brother, our noble brother, son of our noble brother, you are our son, you are another. We only expect goodness from you. We know you, you're only going to do good. And the Prophet ﷺ basically smiles to them and says, I give you the same treatment Nabi Yusuf gave to his brothers. So if you remember Nabi Yusuf, his own brothers threw him in a well and let him, basically got rid of him. And then, of course, afterwards he overpowered them. And when he had his foot on their necks, what did he say? لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. There is no reproach upon you today. There is no more settling of scores. The score is settled, and you are free to go. Everyone is free. There is no harm to be done on anybody. And as we said, basically Makkah was conquered without any hostility. There were even, as we said, 9 people that had death warrants on them. For example, one of them, he had embraced Islam, fraudulently, only to steal some money. And he killed somebody, and then he left Medina, went back to Mecca, said, I'm a pagan, and so it was more for murder. He had murdered somebody. And even if he had repented, so of the 9, 5 of them still repented, still besieged the Prophet ﷺ for mercy, and the Prophet had forgiven them. Whoever came to repent, they were forgiven. But 4 of them were unrepentant, and basically for murder and doing stuff like that, they were executed. So Makkah is taken peacefully, and some of the most hardcore people against the Nabi Sallam, Abu Jahl's son Ikrimah, he embraces Islam. Suhail ibn Amr, by now you should remember, he was the guy at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. He was the one that was so hard, we will not allow the Muslims to go to Medina without permission. This Suhail, very much against Islam, he embraces Islam. And so some of them, Umayyah ibn Khalaf's son, Safwan, the guy who used to abuse Bilal, his son Safwan, who also had tried to assassinate the Nabi Sallam, he embraces Islam as well. And so you find even the most hardcore of criminals were given amnesty, and they embrace Islam. And the Prophet Sallam now he spends 19 days in Mecca, and for the next couple of days he is he's educating, teaching them, and he's taking the pledge. One by one, groups of people will come, and they would pledge Islam to him. They would pledge their allegiance, even the ladies. And the ladies come, and the ladies themselves line up, and they pledge Islam, pledge their commitment to Islam, and they wanted to know, what should we do? And the Prophet said, and it's a good way of knowing what Muslims do. So he says that we worship none but Allah. That's our form, that's the essence of Islam. La ilaha illallah. And you should not commit zina. And here Abu Sufyan's wife Hind said, and what noble lady would commit zina? You don't have to tell me this. Again, there's no adab, there's no she doesn't yet have the respect of a sahabiyya. And so she says, what do you take us for? That we are honorable ladies. Do you think we will just sleep around with everybody? And then the Prophet ﷺ, he continues and he says, and that you are commanded to worship Allah alone, not to commit zina, that you should not steal. And then she says, but my husband is a very stingy man. So can I take money without his permission? Again, it shows you her lack of adab, that she's interrupting him. And the Prophet, at this point, he realizes this is Abu Sufyan's wife, because Abu Sufyan is very awkward. He's very embarrassed at his wife. And the Prophet smiles at this, laughs. It's Abu Sufyan, this is your wife. So she's complaining about her husband in public. He's a stingy man. This guy, he doesn't want to give us. So can I take without his permission? And the Prophet says, you may take, but what is reasonable. So subhanAllah, again in Islam, that if you are due as a wife a certain amount of money for your basic needs and the needs of the children and the household, you may take from your husband's wealth without his permission. There's not stealing. However, as husbands, it doesn't go the other way. You can't take from your wife. You can't open an account. You can't open a bag that doesn't belong to you. But mashallah, this is something with Islam. And so he says everything in the past is forgiven, and that Islam overlooks the past and we move forward. And so the Prophet ﷺ also then reconfirms that Makkah is sacred, and there should be no fighting in Makkah. There should be no harming of the animals. Even the trees are sacred. So when you go to Makkah, you can't pick the leaves, you can't uproot things, you can't kill, the animals, except like if it's a pest or an insect, something like that, then you may. But so how much more? If that's how you treat the animals and the plants of Makkah, what about the people of Makkah and the pilgrims? People come from all over the world to worship Allah, bumping and pushing and shoving. This is really far, far from what should happen within the precincts of Makkah. And so, another interesting moment, the Prophet ﷺ says to Aisha that they're looking at the Kaaba, and he says, "Do you know that your people," he says to her, "your people," but I mean his people, they built the Kaaba incorrectly. The Kaaba is not as it should be. So the Kaaba that we see today was the way the Quraysh's Kaaba is it's a rectangle. Ibrahim's Kaaba was a square, and it had two doors. The Nabi Ibrahim's Kaaba was a rectangle. It was longer, it wasn't as high, and it had two doors, the front and the back. And when the Quraysh rebuilt the Kaaba, before the Nabi became a Nabi, they reconstructed the Kaaba. They wanted to make it a lot bigger. And as they made the Kaaba, they ran out of funds, and so they ended up with the square we see today. It was a square and a little semicircle. They said, "Look, we don't have enough funds to make the full rectangle. We only made a square. We'll put a semicircle, and that semicircle is Kaaba, but we'll get to it." So the Nabi says that to Aisha, the Quraysh, they basically didn't build the Kaaba correctly. They made it much bigger. They also made one door, not two. Nabi Ibrahim's Kaaba was, the two doors were open and people could move freely through it, and they could make salah in the Kaaba. But the Quraysh, part of their elitism, one door, they have access to the door is made high, and it's a much more, in their minds, an imposing structure to give the grandeur of the Quraysh. And the Nabi said, this is not what was intended. The Kaaba should have been accessible to everybody. So Aisha says, so why don't you destroy the Kaaba and rebuild it? And the Nabi says, my people are too new to Islam. Again, shows you his wisdom. Imagine the first thing he does, he comes into Makkah and he demolishes the Kaaba. For the Quraysh, this would seem like he has no respect for the Kaaba. And so he said, leave it. We'll leave it as it is and we'll get there. And subhanAllah, the Nabi never got there. And the Kaaba till today basically is as he had left it. You have the square box that you see, and then next to it is this little semicircle. But as Allah had intended, people can still enter that semicircle and make salah in the Kaaba that is inside the Kaaba. And that's why you make tawaf around it. And of course, remember, the stones of the Kaaba are not important. The bricks are not important. The black stone, all of them are stones. We don't worship the Kaaba. Rather, it is a direction we face as our Qibla. Whether the Kaaba was there or not there, whether it was a semicircle or a rectangle or a square, doesn't make a difference. The stones have no power. And so the Nabi Sallam then, lastly, he sent out expeditions to the various tribes that had idols in the vicinity. And many of these idols are mentioned in Surah Najm. Wad, Suwa'a, Yaghutha, Ya'uq, sorry, that's Surah Nuh. In Ara'aytumul Lata wal Uzza, in Surah Najm, Allah mentions the names of the idols of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the time of the Quraysh. And there were idols called Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, Manat, Al-Thalith. So these were the names of the idols that were very well known in Arabia. They were famous. And each tribe had a big idol. And so the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sends battalions to these different locations to destroy these idols. And there's some interesting stories. Some Sahaba came back and said what we saw there. They mentioned they saw like a witch that had horns in her hair. She was naked, and basically she was trying to defend the idol, and they had to basically execute her and remove the idol. Also, when they broke the idol, so imagine the Muslims walk into the village, and the people are surrounding the idol, crying. The priest comes and he throws the axe at the idol and he says, "Protect yourself." And the Sahabi comes in and he demolishes the Kaaba. The Kaaba demolishes the idol, and the people look at the idol destroyed, and they realize that they were on the losing side. And so when, for the Quraysh, even Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, when they saw the idols being broken, and there was no defense, they realized by now if the idols had any power, they would have done something. And each one, through the idols that they had in their house, they removed it and they destroyed it. So in Makkah, you saw the idols being broken, and alhamdulillah, the people moved towards monotheism, to the religion of the oneness of the creation, the Creator. Not to worship the Creator, sticks and stone and bones and trees. All of this is against Islam. We don't worship people. We don't worship statues. We don't worship the graves of people. We don't worship dead people. We don't worship angels or Anbiya. We worship the Creator of the universe, who has no form, who has no image. And so we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now they're beginning to see the only of and the tribes around Makkah basically surrender. And then the Prophet ﷺ is made aware that the main tribe, or the main city next to Makkah, Taif, the same Taif he went to, who stoned him, they basically declare war on the Muslims. And they are going to oppose him, and there's going to be a battle between him and the people of Taif, and they have amassed a big army. They've now seen what happened in Makkah, and they have been preparing, and they pulling all their resources together to fight, almost like to liberate Makkah. And so we'll talk about the next battle, the Battle of Hunain, in our next episode, inshaAllah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.